At the family reunion last summer, the laughter around the dinner table wasn't warm, it was sharp, slicing through me like glass. My parents looked right at me and said, "You'll never be as successful as your brother, Emily." Everyone laughed, even Nathan, my perfect brother with his perfect career and perfect smile. I forced a laugh too, pretending it didn't sting, but inside, something cracked. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 31, a digital marketing specialist living in Austin, Texas. To my parents, I've always been the creative one, which was just another way of saying the failure. My brother, Dr. Nathan Carter, is the family's golden child, a surgeon, a hero, the benchmark I could never reach. But what they didn't know that night was that their laughter would become the spark that changed everything. The sound of my mother's laughter still echoes in my head. It wasn't the gentle kind, not the laughter that fills a home with warmth. It was mocking, sharp, dismissive, like she was swatting away a child who didn't know her place. We were seated at the long mahogany table in my parents' Denver mansion, surrounded by cousins, aunts, and uncles who had flown in for the annual Carter family reunion. The chandelier sparkled above us. The table was crowded with expensive wine, roasted beef, and stories of success. Everyone seemed to have something to brag about: new jobs, new houses, promotions, marriages. Then, as if on cue, the conversation shifted to achievements. That was always the dangerous part. My father, Richard Carter, leaned back in his chair, his voice deep and proud. Nathan just received another award from the hospital, top surgeon in his department for the third year in a row. Applause erupted around the table. My mother, Linda, placed her hand on Nathan's shoulder and smiled like she had raised a saint. "We're so proud of you, honey. You've worked so hard." Quote. I smiled, clapping politely. I'd heard the same speech 1,000 times. My turn never came. Then Uncle Mark turned to me with an awkward grin. "And you, Emily? What are you up to these days? Still doing that online social media thing?" I felt my stomach twist. That online social media thing, the phrase my family used when they didn't understand or respect what I did. "I work in digital marketing," I said evenly. "I help small businesses grow online branding, strategy, advertising. I actually just signed a contract with a big client in Dallas." Before I could finish, my mother chuckled, waving her hand. "Oh, sweetie, that's cute. You've always been so creative." Her tone made the words sound like an insult. "But it's not quite the same as saving lives, is it?" The table erupted in polite laughter again. Even Nathan smiled, embarrassed but not enough to say anything. My father raised his glass and added, "Well, as long as you're happy, Emily. But maybe one day you'll find something real, something that lasts." Something real. The words hit harder than I expected. I stared down at my plate, the mashed potatoes suddenly looking like cement. I wanted to disappear. I could feel the heat rising behind my eyes, that sting you get when you're seconds away from tears. But I didn't let it show. I laughed, pretending it didn't matter. Even though my heart was pounding so hard, it felt like the room was shaking. The conversation rolled on, now about Nathan's upcoming vacation to Italy with his girlfriend, a dermatologist named Claire. My mother gushed over the details, as if Nathan's love life were a royal event. I sat in silence, chewing slowly, my mind drifting elsewhere. How many years had I sat at this table, trying to earn their approval? How many times had I swallowed my pride and told myself next year will be different? When dessert came, my mom's famous chocolate pie, I excused myself, saying I needed to take a call. No one noticed. I slipped upstairs to the guest room, shut the door, and finally let my shoulders fall. The mirror across the room caught my reflection: red eyes, trembling lips, a forced smile. I hated that image. I hated that I still cared what they thought. I sat on the bed and pulled out my phone. My email inbox was open, unread messages from clients, new project proposals, and a notification from a small cafe in Austin I'd been helping with online ads. They'd just tripled their revenue that month. My work was real. It changed lives, just not in the way my parents measured success. And yet, their words had power. Even after all these years, they could still make me feel small. As I stared at the phone screen, a thought began to form, quiet at first, but steady. I was tired of being underestimated, tired of being the shadow to Nathan's spotlight. If my family needed proof, I'd give it to them, not through words, but through results they couldn't ignore. That night, I returned to the dinner table with a calm face. My father raised an eyebrow. "Everything all right?" "Yes," I said, smiling. "Everything's perfect." Quote, they didn't know it, but something had shifted inside me. That dinner was supposed to humiliate me, but it lit a fire I didn't know I still had. For years, I'd been surviving. From that moment on, I decided I would win. Not for them, but for me. As the reunion ended, my mother hugged Nathan first, as always. Then she turned to me and said, "Don't be a stranger, Emily. Maybe one day you'll surprise us." I smiled. "Oh, Mom," I whispered. "You have no idea." Quote, when I drove back to Austin that night, the highway stretched endlessly ahead, dark and quiet, mirroring the ache inside me. The city lights were still miles away, but I already knew something had ended back in that Denver mansion. It wasn't just my patience. It was the part of me that kept waiting for their approval. I parked in front of my apartment just as the sun began to rise, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold. Normally, I'd collapse onto the couch, scroll through emails, and drown the exhaustion in Netflix. But that morning, I couldn't rest. I opened my laptop instead and started writing. Not an email, not a post, a plan. I titled it Project Phoenix, because that's what I felt like, ashes ready to burn into something new. The plan was simple, at least on paper. Build my own marketing agency. No more freelancing for clients who didn't value me. No more hiding behind the title, consultant. I wanted to create something real, something that couldn't be dismissed with a laugh at a dinner table. I had $7,200 in savings, a laptop that froze at least twice a day, and a tiny apartment with a flickering kitchen light. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. For weeks, I barely left the apartment. I redesigned my personal website, wrote a pitch deck, and reached out to every small business I'd ever worked with. Cafes, boutiques, fitness trainers, independent artists, the people who hustled like I did. I didn't want big corporations, I wanted the dreamers. Some said no. Most didn't reply. But a few said yes. That first month, I signed 3 clients. It wasn't glamorous: a handmade soap brand, a local bakery, and a thrift shop run by a single mom. I poured everything into them. Late nights, endless revisions, campaigns that I tested until my eyes burned. When the results came, they came fast. One client doubled her sales within 2 months. Another expanded her store online for the first time. They sent me thank you messages that made me cry at 2 a.m. But success didn't feel like success yet, not the kind my parents would recognize. I still couldn't shake their voices. "Maybe one day you'll find something real." So I worked harder. I studied analytics until numbers started to make emotional sense. I joined online communities, took courses in digital strategy, and reached out to mentors who had built empires from laptops. Every night, when I hit a wall, I replayed my mother's laugh in my head and kept going. By the end of the first year, I had 9 clients and a tiny team of freelancers who believed in the same vision, helping small creators get big results. I named the agency Novarise Digital. The name meant new rise, and it felt right because I was rising too. Still, I didn't post anything about it on social media. Not yet. I wanted more than survival. I wanted undeniable proof. In the second year, the magic began to happen. We landed a collaboration with a small beverage brand in Dallas that went viral on TikTok. The campaign reached 2 million views in a week. Their revenue tripled. Suddenly, my inbox was full of inquiries, partnerships, investors, even an interview request from Austin Business Weekly. When the article came out, the headline read, "Local Woman Turns Small Dreams into Big Impact. How Emily Carter is Changing Digital Marketing for Small Businesses." I stared at that headline for a long time. It wasn't about revenge. It was validation, quiet, powerful, earned. That night, I called my best friend Mia, who'd watched me struggle for years. "Do you think it's weird that I still want my parents to see this?" I asked. She laughed softly. "Not weird, Em, just human. But make them see it your way, not theirs." Her words stuck with me, so I printed that article, framed it, and hung it right above my desk. Every morning when I opened my laptop, it reminded me of how far I'd come, not for them, but for the girl who once cried in her parents' guest room. I was still far from finished. My company wasn't huge. My name wasn't global. But I'd done what they said I couldn't. I built something real. And I promised myself one thing: the next family reunion, I wouldn't show up quietly. Not as the forgotten daughter, not as the joke at the table, but as Emily Carter, founder and CEO of Novarise Digital, the woman who turned their doubt into her empire. 2 years after that humiliating family dinner, everything felt different, not just my career, but the air around me. It buzzed with momentum. My small agency, Novarise Digital, had grown from a one-woman show into a full-fledged team of 15. We had clients in 5 states, steady revenue, and the kind of reputation that attracted attention I'd never dared to imagine. I still remembered that first viral campaign, the Dallas beverage brand, that catapulted us into the spotlight. It wasn't luck. It was late nights, trial and error, and relentless persistence. But once the doors opened, they didn't stop. Word spread fast in the small business world. Every struggling entrepreneur wanted a piece of whatever magic Novarise had. Then came the email that changed everything. The subject line read, "Invitation to speak, National Digital Marketing Summit, New York City." At first, I thought it was spam. I reread it twice before realizing it was real. They wanted me to give a keynote speech on small business branding in the digital era. I sat frozen for a moment, then laughed out loud. 2 years ago, I couldn't even get my parents to take my job seriously. Now, I was being flown across the country to teach others how to do it. The following weeks were a blur. My team worked like fire, preparing visuals, building case studies, refining the brand voice. I ordered my first custom-tailored suit, something that made me feel powerful, like I was finally stepping into the role I'd been building all along. When I walked onto that New York stage, the lights blinded me for a second, but the applause that followed brought me right back. Hundreds of faces looked up at me, not with pity or dismissal, but with curiosity, respect, belief. I took a deep breath and began. I built my company from a kitchen table with $7,000 and a laptop that crashed twice a day. What I learned wasn't about marketing. It was about belief. That your worth isn't defined by who doubts you, but by what you do when they do. The room went silent, and I could feel every word land. That moment, that electricity, was the validation I'd been chasing my entire life. Not from my family, not even from myself, but from the universe whispering, "You did it." A week later, the speech went viral on LinkedIn. Messages poured in, entrepreneurs thanking me, young women saying I'd inspired them to start their own businesses. My follower count tripled overnight. And then, something unexpected happened. I got a text from Nathan. "Saw your talk online. Congrats, sis. You really made it." For a few seconds, I didn't know how to respond. Nathan had never said words like that before. The golden boy of the Carter family was proud of me. Then another message followed. Mom and Dad saw it too. They're impressed. Impressed. That word sat heavy in my chest. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. A few days later, an email popped up in my inbox. Subject: Family Reunion. This weekend. It was from my mother. The same annual gathering. The same house. But this time, I wasn't dreading it. I decided to go. When I arrived, the scene felt eerily familiar: the mansion, the laughter, the smell of Linda's cooking wafting through the air. But this time, when I stepped inside, the room went quiet for a moment. My mother turned, surprise flickering across her face. "Emily," she said softly, "you came." "I did," I smiled. Didn't want to miss the tradition. My father, usually so composed, cleared his throat. "We watched your keynote," he said. "Quite something." "Thank you," I replied simply. Nathan walked over and hugged me. It wasn't awkward, just different. "You've built something incredible," he said quietly. "You proved us all wrong." For a second, I saw the boy I used to play with, before all the comparisons poisoned things. Maybe, just maybe, we could start again. Dinner that night felt lighter. For once, I wasn't the butt of the jokes. My parents asked genuine questions about my work, how I started, what my company did. It felt strange at first, but not unwelcome. As dessert arrived, my father raised his glass. "To Emily," he said, "for showing us that success comes in many forms." Everyone clapped. My mother even smiled, not the condescending one, but the kind that reaches the eyes. I raised my glass too. To family, I said, for being the reason I never gave up. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't triumph. It was peace, the kind that comes when you finally stop needing permission to be proud of yourself. That night, when I looked at my reflection in the same mirror that had once witnessed my tears, I smiled. I didn't need to prove anything anymore, because I wasn't the shadow of someone else's success. I was Emily Carter, the woman who built her own light. The morning after the reunion, I woke up in my old childhood room, the same white curtains, the same wooden bookshelf filled with my teenage journals, the same faint scent of lavender my mother used to spray before bedtime. For the first time in years, the space didn't feel suffocating. It felt peaceful. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, landing on a framed photo on the desk, me and Nathan at ages 6 and 9, grinning with chocolate ice cream all over our faces. I hadn't noticed it last night. My mother must have kept it all these years. I picked it up and smiled. We looked so happy then, before expectations and comparisons turned love into a competition. Downstairs, I could hear the soft clinking of plates, the sound of my mother in the kitchen. I hesitated for a moment, then walked down. She looked up as I entered, surprised but smiling. "You're up early," she said, pouring me a cup of coffee just like she used to. "I made pancakes, your favorite." For a moment, I just stared at her. My mother, the same woman who once said I'd never be as successful as my brother, now standing there, trying to bridge years of distance with coffee and pancakes. "Thanks, Mom," I said quietly, taking the cup. We sat in silence for a bit. Then she took a deep breath and said the words I never thought I'd hear. "I owe you an apology, Emily." I froze. She kept going, her voice trembling slightly. "Your father and we were too hard on you. We thought we were pushing you towards something better, but really, we were just blind. You've done something amazing, something we didn't understand, and I'm sorry we made you feel less because of it." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to cry. Another part wanted to laugh at the absurdity of hearing that after all these years. But mostly, I just felt relief, like a heavy door had finally opened. "Thank you, Mom," I said softly. "That means more than you think." Quote. When Dad came in a few minutes later, he joined the conversation in his usual formal tone. "Your presentation," he said, "was impressive. You spoke with confidence. Leadership." I smiled faintly. "Thanks, Dad. Guess all those marketing campaigns paid off." He chuckled, a rare sound from him. "Seems they did." It wasn't a full reconciliation, not yet, but it was something. The walls we'd built for decades had cracks now, and through them, light was starting to pour in. Later that afternoon, I took a walk around the neighborhood. The trees were taller, the houses looked smaller, but the streets still carried echoes of the girl I used to be, the one who dreamed big but doubted herself, because no one else believed in her. As I walked, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. I hadn't built Novarise just to prove my family wrong. I'd built it to prove to myself that I could stand on my own. All the late nights, the fear, the failures, they weren't just about revenge. They were about transformation. By the time I returned to Austin, I felt lighter. My inbox was overflowing with new opportunities, collaborations, podcast invites, even a potential investor for expansion. But instead of rushing into work like I usually did, I took a moment to breathe. I brewed a cup of coffee, sat by my window, and opened my journal. On the first page, I wrote, "You don't need their validation anymore. You became everything they said you couldn't be, not to spite them, but to become you." That became my mantra. Over the next few months, I focused less on proving and more on living. I mentored young women trying to start their own businesses, especially those who came from families that didn't believe in them. Every time I saw one of them succeed, I felt a little piece of my own story healing. One day, Nathan called. "Mom told me you're mentoring now," he said. "That's incredible, Em. You've really turned it all around." "Thanks, Nate," I said. "Guess we both did in our own ways." We laughed. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel forced. Months later, during a video interview, the host asked me a question that caught me off guard. "What inspired you to start Novarise?" I smiled. thinking of that dinner table years ago, the laughter, the sting, the words that once broke me. I guess, I said slowly, I was inspired by people who underestimated me. Sometimes, doubt is the greatest gift. It forces you to become unstoppable. After the interview, I sat quietly, letting the words sink in. Because it was true. If my parents had believed in me from the start, maybe I never would have fought so hard to believe in myself. Life has a strange way of shaping us, sometimes through love, sometimes through pain, and sometimes through both. As I looked out the window at the city skyline, I whispered to myself, "Thank you for doubting me, because you made me who I am." And with that, I smiled, not the kind that hides the hurt, but the kind that comes from finally being free. It was almost a year after that peaceful morning in my parents' kitchen when I got the unexpected call. I was in a meeting with my team, discussing our latest campaign for a sustainable clothing brand, when my phone buzzed. The caller ID read, "Mom." I hesitated. She usually texted these days little check-ins, photos of the garden or "how's work," messages that still surprised me every time. But a call? That was rare. "Hey, Mom," I answered, stepping out of the conference room. Her voice was unusually calm, even tentative. "Emily, sweetheart, I was wondering if you might have time to talk later today. It's about your father's company." I froze. "Dad's company?" "Yes," she said softly. "Carter and Associates. They're having some trouble. Your father thought maybe you could take a look." I blinked, unsure I'd heard right. My father, the man who once laughed when I told him digital marketing could transform businesses, wanted my help? I agreed to meet them that weekend. Saturday afternoon, I drove back to Denver, the same route I'd taken so many times. But this time, with a completely different heart. My car wasn't old and rattling anymore. It was sleek, quiet. My first big purchase from Novarise's profits. Still, as the familiar gates of my parents' mansion came into view, my chest tightened with nostalgia and a strange sense of irony. Inside, the air was thick with tension. My father was sitting in the study, the same leather chair where he used to lecture me about real success. He looked older, lines deeper, eyes weary. On the desk in front of him were stacks of financial reports and charts. He stood as I entered. "Emily, thanks for coming." "Of course," I said, sitting down across from him. "What's going on?" He hesitated before sliding a report toward me. "Our numbers have dropped significantly this quarter. We've lost several clients, and the newer firms, they're taking over the market with online strategies, social media campaigns, SEO, all that digital stuff." He said the last part like the words still felt foreign in his mouth. I skimmed the papers. Their website was outdated, their online presence almost non-existent. They were still marketing like it was 2008. "I see the problem," I said finally. "You're invisible online, Dad. The world has changed. Clients expect a story, a brand personality, a human connection. You're still selling with brochures." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I know. That's why I called you." There it was, the sentence I never thought I'd hear. I looked at him carefully. The proud, unbending man who once told me to find a real job was now asking for my guidance. "I can help," I said quietly, "but I'll need access to everything: website analytics, client lists, marketing expenses, even your customer feedback." He nodded immediately. "Whatever you need." We spent hours going through details. For the first time, he didn't interrupt me, didn't dismiss my ideas. He listened, really listened. And when I explained how a targeted ad campaign could bring back lost clients, his eyes actually lit up. This could work," he said slowly, almost in awe. "It will," I replied, smiling. "You just have to trust the process and me." He looked at me for a long moment, then said softly, "I do, Emily. I should have a long time ago." Something inside me shifted, then not triumph, not revenge, just quiet satisfaction. Over the next few weeks, my team at Novarise partnered with his company. We rebranded their image, launched a new website, and ran a series of digital campaigns that targeted their ideal clients. Within 2 months, their engagement tripled. By the end of the quarter, revenue had grown by 40%. When we presented the results at their board meeting, my father actually clapped. The board members looked at me with admiration, Some even asked for Novarise's business card. After the meeting, he pulled me aside. "I owe you more than I can ever say," he murmured. "You don't owe me anything, Dad," I said. "You just gave me the chance to prove what I've always known, that we're both capable of more than people expect." He smiled, a rare, genuine one. "I'm proud of you, Emily." For the first time in my life, those words didn't sound like a concession. They sounded like truth. That night, as we all sat down for dinner, my mother raised a toast. To Emily, not just our daughter, but the woman who saved this family's legacy. Everyone lifted their glasses. Even Nathan, sitting beside me, whispered, "Told you they'd come around." I laughed quietly, not because I needed the validation anymore, but because life had come full circle. Years ago, I'd left that same dinner table in tears. Now, I sat at it as an equal, maybe even the one holding it all together. And for the first time, I realized forgiveness didn't mean forgetting the pain. It meant transforming it into strength, into grace, into something that could heal more than just me. The night after helping my father's company close their best quarter in 5 years, I found myself standing alone on the balcony of my hotel room, overlooking the Denver skyline. The city shimmered below 1,000 lights, flickering like the heartbeat of something alive. I breathed in the crisp air, the quiet hum of distant traffic filling the silence. It struck me how far I'd come, not just in miles or money, but in spirit. The woman staring back from the glass door wasn't the same girl who once cried in her parents' guest room after being told she'd never measure up. That girl had been searching for permission to exist. This one didn't need anyone's approval to shine. I thought about my parents not as villains anymore, but as flawed people shaped by their own fears. My father had grown up in a world where success meant stability, and stability meant control. My mother had lived her life believing love was proven through achievement. They didn't mean to hurt me. They just didn't know another way to love. And maybe, just maybe, I had spent years trying to earn their pride when what I really needed was my own. The next morning, before heading to the airport, I stopped by their house one last time. The sun was barely up, casting golden light across the yard. My father was already in the garden, pruning his roses, the same ones he used to tend to, while lecturing me about focus and discipline. He looked up when he saw me. "Leaving already?" "Yeah," I said. "Early flight. Thought I'd say goodbye." He nodded, setting down the shears. "You know, your presentation last week made the whole team rethink our approach. You changed more than just our numbers, Emily. You changed the way we see business and you." I smiled softly. "I didn't do it for that, Dad. I just wanted to help." He hesitated, then said something I never expected to hear. "You've taught me something I never learned in all my years running a company: humility and trust." Quote. For a moment, we stood there in silence, two people who had finally met in the middle after years of misunderstanding. Then he did something he'd never done before. He hugged me. Not the quick, awkward kind of hug I grew up with, but a real one. Firm, honest. When I went inside, my mother was in the kitchen, humming softly. She handed me a thermos of coffee like she always used to before school. "For the road," she said. "Ismilet." "Thanks, Mum." She reached out and took my hand. "We're proud of you, you know," she whispered. "Not because of the company or the money, but because you never gave up on us, even when we didn't deserve it." I swallowed hard, emotion tightening my throat. "It took me a while," I admitted, "but I realized forgiveness isn't for them, it's for me." Holding on to anger was just another way of staying small. Her eyes glistened, and for the first time in my life, she didn't try to hide it. She just nodded and said, "You turned out stronger than all of us, Emily." The flight home to Austin felt different this time. I didn't stare out the window replaying old memories or rehearsing imaginary arguments. I just sat there, peaceful, grounded, free. When I landed, my phone buzzed with new emails, partnership offers, speaking invitations, clients wanting consultations. The world I had built was alive and thriving. But instead of diving straight into work, I turned it all off for a moment and drove to the lake near my apartment. The air was cool, the water calm. I sat on the pier, letting the breeze brush against my face. I pulled out my journal, the same one I'd been writing in since the night of the reunion years ago, and flipped to the first page. The words stared back at me. Project Phoenix Rise again. I smiled, then I turned to a fresh page and wrote, "The fire that once burned me became the light that led me home." That line felt like closure, the full circle of my story. Because the truth was, my family's doubt had shaped me, but it didn't define me. Their laughter once broke me, but it also built the foundation for the woman I had become: resilient, independent, fearless. In forgiving them, I hadn't excused their words. I'd simply reclaimed my power. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I whispered into the fading light, "Thank you for the pain. It taught me how to rise." And, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the girl who was never enough. I felt whole. My name is Emily Carter, and this time, when I laugh, it's not out of pain, it's out of peace.